the American entrepreneurial engine that drives that remarkable economy. Well, if you read the business biographies of most of these tycoons, especially in the early stages, you will find that bankruptcy once, twice, three times was common. So I learned on that note that the fear of failure is holding us back. Yes, there are other issues, interest rates, all the various macroeconomic issues that one can cite, but the reluctance to start, the reluctance to step out, the reluctance to be bold, the reluctance to be experimented. As far as I'm concerned, a major cause of that is that fear of shame and embarrassment and failure that holds back people from actually trying. Joe, let me end there. If anybody has any question, happy to answer.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Ngumi. Unfortunately, a majority of us were logged off, so allow me to use the next 5 minutes. First of all, to thank you for your time. We'll be able to share with them online, so we'll tell them where to get it. So they will not lose it. They will not lose anything. So first of all is to thank you for your time, because I know it's a huge sacrifice. Number two, to say that I have picked a couple of lessons. Number one, somebody who is working in corporate, there is enough rigor that is required there. There is enough believe in yourself, because you're going to come across people who cannot give you space. So you must own your space. And then you must also not listen to the voices and forces that tells you it cannot be done. So you must have some inner belief, inner drive. And then you came to the idea of the person who is moving from corporate to what you call the cold shower. And I think that's where majority of the people who were coming on lockdown here were looking at. And I love the analogy you gave of the star lawyer, that most likely the star lawyer is not always going to be the person who is going to be the managing partner, because the star lawyer is driven by libido, driven by what, of course, you call the alpha male. But then there must be somebody who is sober-minded enough to be able to bring realism, to be able to control cost, regular discipline, a person who is able to keep people on toes. And yet the last thing that you ended up with, which has also come in very hardy, is the idea of failure. And of course, our system have shown us that is exactly what happens. I have a couple of questions that when I put your name out there, a couple of people reached out to me and they tell me they are going to reach later on. Number one, what has made you keep bouncing back? You leave corporate, you go into Loita, and thank you for sharing how Loita came out. What has made you, what has given you that ability to keep coming back?
Well, it's difficult to self-analyze. So I'm sure it's some inner drive, but I can tell you one external motivator. And I was born in the middle of the emergency, and I came to maturity as a teenager and then as a young adult in the years of Kenya's transition to a sovereign nation. If there was one thing that was inculcated in us in the 60s and early 70s, in school, in home, in conversations, in examples, it was a fierce pride. It was a pride that we needed to put our nations on the same pedestal as other nations were, that we had a responsibility and an obligation to help Kenya because we were a very tiny elite of people who happened to have the opportunity for good education, for a good standard of living, and that we owed it to ourselves to come back and raise the country. Think about it as having the same sort of mentality that created the fierce ambitions of a man like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, who came from a very similar British colonial background, and the background of being regarded as inferior because he was Chinese, and in our case because he was Kenyan, African. That attitude bred a fierce pride, and that fierce pride also says failure is not an option. Yeah. Those are reversals. Those are not failures. Getting a business going down and being forced to go back to banking and being forced to go and do things you thought you had left behind. For example, I keep telling people I left Citibank in 1989 as an assistant general manager. After my adventures in Barclays and Reuters, and then on my own, I came back to Citibank in 2000, and my boss was somebody I had hired as a graduate entrant in 1987.
That is very interesting. That's very interesting.
You need to
humility.
Correct. But also, I wasn't going back to work for the prestige. Okay. I was going back to work to make a living and clear my debts and what have you. But secondly, I was going back to work because I had a mission. Mm. And if Citibank was to be the launch pad, the platform for that mission, and if that's what I had to accept, so be it. And we want to, and you go on with life. So there's a sort of an inner drive, a bigger vision, but also a fierce determination that we will not let reversals hold us back. And in my chosen field, I've always said that without an efficient financial services system, capital mobilization and deployment structure, we are going precisely nowhere. So when I see today our struggles to come up with infrastructure in the light of diminishing foreign aid and in the light of a lowered space for borrowing from global institutions, I look back to my days in Citibank and Barclays and Reuters using treasury bonds, reviving the treasury bond market with the central bank, creating and structuring the infrastructure bonds, which are very popular now, which we structured then. And those are the impetuses that say we can do it. So even if even if USA dies, and we no longer have financing for our public health sector, even if global capital decides to flee and go back to the States because the rates are higher and growth rates are higher, it is not impossible because we have done it before. We can still mobilize and deploy capital from within our economies. It is those sorts of drives and fierce pride that drive us.
Whoa, thank you so much. Now, you have gone into an area that is very interesting in the context we are, because in my community, for me personally, yesterday we went in for a meeting of a small cell group that we normally have a weekly fellowship together, and that issue of the US not giving money, and I didn't want to take this tangent because you have brought it. I think it's very important that we can give it some meat, because this, once it goes out, there are people I'm sure who will listen. So, and then you are saying we know people within our community who have been affected. And I was looking at figures, and the figure I saw online, for example, I think from the US was saying about 34,000 people in Kenya are in that line. Now, what kind of hope can you give to this team? Because These are people, majority of them, of course, there are some who are in what you call, empowerment of women. So majority of them, of course, are breadwinners, they are family members. What word of encouragement and hope, because you have not had much coming from maybe the quarters we would be expecting, would you tell them? And have you seen this kind of thing before?
I can turn into a preacher and tell you to pray and be strong and what have you. I have not really been a retail banker, so I haven't really interacted a lot with at individual level. But I'll give you an example, which ought to give you us hope as Kenyans. In the 90s, and this I'm not talking at a macro level. In the 90s, we gradually lost access to foreign aid. We had no growth. We couldn't fund our budget. We were using treasury bills, which, because of the way they work every 90 days, were ballooning into an almost impossible problem for us to resolve.
Right.
And I recall around that time, around the turn of the century, going back to a topic that I had raised with the previous governor of the central bank, Mika Cheshram. He had done something, and then his successor, Nahashon Nyaga. I remember going to him one evening and saying, with a colleague of mine called James Umurigo, and saying, look, we can't go on like this. Our debt will become unsustainable. And yet we know that the same cash that is piling into T-bills,
yes,
and creating this huge unmanageable, potentially unmanageable debt,
yes,
can be redirected into longer-term instruments, which will give government breathing room to reorganize its debt.
yes.
That is how we revived the listed treasury bond market. It was, by the turn of the century, treasury bills were more than 90% of Kenya government funding, and domestic funding of Kenya government was quite low. I think it was about 20% or 10% or whatever. When we put together the treasury bond structure and put attractive features and made it easy for people to buy and sell, suddenly we moved from having the pressures of short-term debt to having longer-term debt. I think by the time I stopped being involved with this program around 2014, yes, the average tenor had gone on to heaven knows what, 5, 6, 7 years. Treasury bonds had become 70, 80% of financing. Domestic debt mobilization had become had come to make up half of Kenya government's financing.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that looking at the problem realistically and coming and deciding what can we do, not what have we lost, but right, how can we move forward, helped us at a macro level to stabilize Kenya government's financings. I think it is more a matter of attitude. For example, you say 34,000 Kenyans are affected. Why? Yes. Because they have been working with USAID programs and have been employed by those programs.
Yes.
What have they gained? What can they bring? What can they bring? What can they bring to the table in terms of the expertise they have gained in those fields? How can they partner with the many practitioners in medicine, hospitals, clinics, whatever, and others to get to the same end, but using a different
route,
means.
using a different means.
My real challenge with that question is the assumption that the necessary condition to achieving what is having a USAID or a similar. No, it's not.
I get you.
You get me now?
Yes.
And it doesn't even have to be domestic resources. When USAID say they won't be there, I think back to my days chairing the board of a company called CarePay, who you know better as MTIBA, which we developed from virtually scratch to being the serious tech company here.
Yes.
The people backing MTIBA are not USAID. There are a myriad of foundations out there which have the same and perhaps far more capital. In fact, not perhaps, have far more capital.
Yes.
Foundations run by the families that founded things like Pfizer or Bayer, those huge Western foundations.
Yes.
Who has gone out there to tell these foundations that what USAID has, what the departure of USAID is doing is making life more dangerous for them?
Yes.
Because all these poor Africans will get on boats and migrate to their countries.
Yes.
Why don't you come into Kenya and Africa, fill that void, and help us become self-sufficient? There are ways and there are ways. So I'm saying that what I fear is
a mindset attitude issue that requires to shift.
It's a helplessness which I don't understand. Yes.
Whoa. Thank you so much for that, because that is a different way of looking at it, and I really find that. In fact, the other question I had was, how do you keep the emotional shape up to have that business flair mindset? That was my question. How do you keep that? Because this is mind. It has nothing to do with the circumstances we have. And you have put it very correctly that companies like Pfizer, Bayer, they have more resources than what you are getting from. So how do you keep that mind shape up on a personal
level? By keeping your focus on the end goal. If you get stuck on the means, then you will be in trouble.
Okay. Good. Last two questions. The last one I got was, how can you advise three kind of businesses? One, a startup, especially struggling on financial. Two, a business that has been going on. Like I know a family business. Here I have a specific, a family business is a hospital, level 4 hospital. Then they find they have about 53 employees. They find they are getting into headwinds in terms of raising capital. And then the last one is, how would you advise a business that is looking for partnership, especially where you want to scale up? Maybe you've been running for about 5-7 years, but you feel you require partners. What do you look for in a partner? So startup, struggling business that is midway somewhere and looking for partner.
Let me answer those as best as I can. Okay. Startups are tough. There's no question about it. Mm-hmm. Startups are tough.
True. That's what I agree.
And there is a reason why the capital that goes in there is called risk capital. It is highly risky.
Okay.
Unfortunately, our structure doesn't have our ecosystem doesn't have those structures, the angel investors, the incubators, the people who will back these dreams.
No.
So I have spoken to many startups. I have done a startup and failed. So yes. I know very much. I have lost a lot of money or a lot of savings on startups because they are tough. And the only thing I can advise people, and I've advised people in the past who have asked me, I've told them I am not expert, but at least I can tell you one thing. Assume that you will have no income, or rather no profit.
Yes.
For 3 years. Can you survive 3 years? If this startup is
We are talking
If this
about
startup,
90 months. 90
if
months.
this startup is your main source of income for your family,
Yes.
think and think again.
Okay.
No matter what scenario planning you do, you will find obstacles you did not expect. I told you, I tried being a sugar trader and a wine trader.
Wine and sugar. Wine and sugar.
Yes.
Okay. That is for setup. Now, when you come for the struggling,
businesses will always reach that point of struggling. Okay. And I think that we've been, as a country, unfair on banks. I think that I find that our banks actually have not been that bad, provided they actually understand your business, understand you, and you also go to them in a timely manner. This question tends to occur when you've gone to the bank because you are in trouble.
Or when you are desperate.
Which for a commercial bank is precisely the wrong time to go. There is an old saying,
yes,
that a banker is a man who gives you an umbrella when you don't require it and takes it away when it begins to rain. It is not entirely true.
Okay.
It's not entirely true, of course. But the reality is that if you think ahead and see where the headwinds can come, then you can actually speak to your bankers and other financiers at a time when you are not desperate. Because mark my words, the desperation will show either in your face or in your numbers.
Oh yes,
that you are in trouble. So the only advice I can give to people is to adopt the government thinking. Governments put together what are called medium-term expenditure programs.
Right.
That's what I'll be doing. I'll be doing a rolling 5-year program so that you can spot where these problems will be. Yes, emergencies can always occur.
Yes.
But emergencies for a company that is well prepared will be manageable. But all I can advise is develop relationships with your bankers when the times are good.
Right.
Make them understand your business. Otherwise, when you go to them when times are tough, you will find them very unreceptive or very expensive.
Oh.
In terms
maybe before you go there to that is the same organization is the one now feels, because it has been a family-owned business. Now it has been run by like two spouses, the two of, so now they're also struggling in asking, how do we bring a board on top? And of course, together with now partners. Yes.
I have a good friend called Joe Keller, I think it is. He runs an organization that caters for family businesses. I will find out.
Okay, please.
I'll send it to you.
Please.
Because that is a challenge that affects most families, whether or not they are struggling. This whole issue of outside capital, outside expertise, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
He and Carol Musioka as well are doing a lot of work in trying to get families to understand that, to understand two things.
Right.
You founders are not immortal.
Yes.
And secondly, all knowledge and wisdom does not reside only in your family.
True.
You need to take risks. You need to have outsiders. You need to pick the brains of the best that there are.
True.
So yeah, it's tough, but yeah.
Good. Well, I think.
And as for your third question, there are plenty of firms in this town who can help you to partner, to get international partners, whether those partners are strategics, are PE funds, are DFIs. I would say that this town actually has a lot of advisors. That I would say.
Wow.
So again, I will put up a list of a few and send it to you.
Kindly.
But there are people here who will. I don't think that finding people to to connect you to international partners and capital is the problem. Today, the issue is you packaging your business such that it is attractive enough for some people to take an interest in it.
I get you. Whoa. I think this has been a morning that we really looked for. And I was recollecting how we got connected. I think it was an act of God. There's something the lawyers call the act of God, because my parents were struggling because of power connection back in Nyandarua County. The power had been connected in 5 villages without knowing me at all. That's what I say now. You have been, the way you said, you have nationalism. In fact, the nationalistic mentality, because you didn't know me, you didn't know, we have never met. We have only met today online for the first time, but you are able to help through talking to the necessary people at Kenya Power for the family of 6 octogenarians. Now they are in their 80s. My dad is 84, and the others are 81, 83. And recently I got a call from the village, from another section that has no power, and asking me, what magic did you do to get power? And I told them, I met a gentleman, I have never met him. He never even asked for a coin or anything. And that left me, and even those parents, I'm sure they are blessings, because they have spoken so many, and they are happy now because there's no darkness. So I really appreciate this. I know this is not going to be the last time that we talk together. I'm sure we'll drop as you drop the messages, we'll also get our contacts. I'll come through. What I have taken away from this is that our education system, the British education system that we had, and especially some of you who maybe were a little bit, your parents were able to take you again to the Western education, plus even what was practiced on us here, killed that attitude of, or brought in the idea of fear of failure. My first employer was a chocolates company. I don't want to mention the name, but it was a multinational leading, and you could see the structures. When you look at those structures, you never see them as a startup. You see an established organization. So fear of failure. And then number 2, what I have taken away is discipline. And then lastly, extreme humility. I know this has taken extreme humility because we don't know, we have never met before. And even as we had our own internal issues on the system and power, but you have stayed with me. And I really appreciate this, John. You never know where this is going to take us. Once we have put it online, people will be consuming it for generations. And I'm sure we can do a sequel or a follow-up. Last word you'd want to give for the morning as we add this entrepreneurship summit?
No. That is almost asking me to be a preacher. All I can say is keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, John. God bless you. We are going to take it up another day, another time.
Sawa.
Thank you.